So this video is going to explain to you our cultural research project that we've begun. It's going to talk about the 10 questions that we're going to go through, and then there are other videos on my website that will explain to you the second and third part of this project. So the materials that you're going to need are construction paper, notebook paper, a pen or pencil, and colored pencils, and those are the materials you'll need for the entire project. Remember, our construction paper is something that was provided to you in class. So I have a link on my faculty website that'll get you into the website, and it'll get you straight to where you need to be. And these are the first 10 questions that we're going to talk about. You're writing these answers on your notebook paper. Remember, you don't need to write the question, but you need to make sure that we're numbering them correctly. So the first question we talk about is, what is the total number of immigrants who came to the United States from 1820 to 2010? So when we get on the website, there's a big line graph with a bunch of white numbers that goes from 1820 to 2010. You just need to take a calculator and add up all of those numbers and write down that in a complete sentence what the number is. And that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question, you need to choose a decade. A decade is 10 years from 1820 to 2010. Any 10 years between that time span will work. And you need to find out what the U.S. population was at that time, whatever decade you've chosen. So let's say you chose the 1880s, then you would go on to Google and Google U.S. population 1880. And that should pop right straight up with the population of the United States in 1880. And again, in another sentence, you just write down the population at that time. So then the third part is where you're comparing your first two answers. So how does the overall population compare to the number of people who arrived in that decade? So you need to compare. You need to tell me, were more immigrants coming into the United States than who were already living there? Were there more U.S. citizens than what were immigrating? You need to tell me which one's which. Who's greatest or least? Compare the two numbers. So the second question, from 1820 to 2010, which three countries had the highest number of immigrants come to the United States? So again, you just need to look at the line graph that we looked at for this first part of question 1, and then figure out which decade had the three highest countries had their immigrants with the highest numbers between 1820 and 2010, and just write down, in 1880 this was the country that had the highest number of immigrants, and whatever the other two times were, and the country that had the largest immigrants. On number 3, choose one of the countries you selected from the question above. During which decade or time period did most of the immigrants come to the United States? So if one of the three countries that was up here from number 2 was Ireland, then you would look specifically at the country of Ireland, and you would figure out during which decade or time period had the highest number of immigrants from Ireland that came to the United States. And why do you think that is? Remember, when we go up and we go into our Explore the Historical Timeline and we click on the Learn More words, it'll tell you, it'll pop up and it'll get real big. It looks almost like a postcard almost, and it'll tell you what happened and when it happened and who's immigrating and why they're immigrating. You need to tell me, why do you think that is? Okay, that's what I'm looking for. That this event happened in Ireland and that's why people are immigrating, or whatever country you're talking about. Number 4, immigration to the United States doubled from the 1890s to the 1900s. What events may be responsible for those numbers? Think about events that happened all around the world. Okay, again, those events will be shown to you on that historical timeline that's on the website. And you just need to tell me what events made those numbers double. So when you go into that historical timeline and you click on that decade from between the 1890s to the 1900s, and you look and you click on that click more or learn more, you click on that and it'll pop right up and it'll tell you, you know, these were the three main, historical events that were going on around the world to cause these high numbers to double in immigration into the United States. Number 5. In the 1930s, immigration to the United States declined. Why? What was happening in the 1930s in the United States? The 1930s has its own section in the timeline, and it'll tell you a whole answer about what's going on and why the United States had a decline in our immigration. Okay, it's very, very simple. It's right there for you. You just need to, again, write it in a complete sentence. Number 6. Look at the immigration data from Ireland, China, and Vietnam. When did the greatest number of immigrants arrive from those countries? Using the historical timeline or other online resources, explain what events may be responsible for these numbers. Okay, so we don't need to look at other online resources. The historical timeline on this website is plenty. You need to, again, look at 3 specific countries. We're looking at Ireland, China, and Vietnam. And we're looking for when they had their greatest number of immigrants arrive into the United States from Ireland, China, or Vietnam. So that'll be shown to you on that big line graph that arrived. That's the very front part of the website. And you should be able to see Ireland, China, and Vietnam in there. And it'll tell you their number of immigrants. And then explain what events may be responsible for these numbers. You go into the timeline. You'll have to click on the decades that you already know. You already know when they arrived, so you just need to click on that decade in the timeline, and it'll tell you what was happening in these 3 countries to cause them to come and immigrate to the United States. So choosing any country you want, repeat the activity in the question above. Why did you choose your country? What did you learn? So again, you're doing the same thing. You're telling me when the greatest number of immigrants arrived in the United States from whatever country you chose. Hopefully you're not choosing Ireland, China, or Vietnam. And then you're going to tell me what events caused those immigrants to come to the United States, whatever country it is. Okay? You need to tell me why you chose your country and what you learned about your country. Okay? Number 8. At one point in history, the greatest number of immigrants to the United States came from Europe. Look at the data to figure out in which decade that changed. So what I want to know at this very front part is, when did Europe's immigration to the United States decline? I do not want to know when it is the highest. I want to know when it's the lowest. Okay? Then I want to know, at that time, what continent were most people coming from then? So, when Europe's immigration took a dive and went low, I want to know which country went high. So the first thing I want to know is what decade Europe's immigration declined. I need a number. I need a number that would be on a historical timeline. And then I want to know within that time span, so if it's, the 1900s, for example, if that's when Europe's immigration declined, I want to know in 1900 which continent's immigration increased. Which one went up in that same time span. Number 9. From 2000 to 2010, which continent or region did most people come from? So you'll be able to see that on that line graph that pops right up when you first enter the website. You just need to look at 2000 to 2010 and then tell me which region most people came from. And then from which country did the immigrants come from? Okay, so the first one I'm looking for is continent or region. So we're looking at, like, they mostly came from the Asian continent, or they mostly came from the African continent, or the South American continent, right? But then I want to know specifically what country. And it will tell you what country when you click on those little tabs at the top when it's talking about It'll show you like a pie graph on one of them, but it has like by decade, by region, and then by 50 years in region. Click on by region and it will tell you what country they come from. Number 10, think about how economics impacted immigration. Use your research skills to find out which countries were the richest from 2000 to 2010. This is usually determined by GDP or gross domestic product. How many immigrants came from these countries to the United States? How does that compare to poor countries? So for this question, you're going to have to do a little bit more research than what the website will allow for. You can go on to Google or Bing or whichever your parents will let you do, and you just need to go in and you just need to Google or Bing 2000 to 2010 GDP, world GDP, and that should pop up all of these countries throughout the entire world and their GDP. So I want to know which countries were the richest from 2000 to 2010. Okay, that's about the top 5 countries. Okay, and then I want to know from these top 5 countries who are the richest, how many immigrants came from those countries. So if the top 5 are like China, Japan, Australia, England and Ireland, if those are the 5 countries, then I want to know, out of those 5, what were their numbers? How many immigrated from England and Ireland and China and Australia and so on? Okay, and then I want you to tell me, how does that compare to the poorest countries? So again, the 5 bottom countries at the very bottom of that GDP list. What countries are they? Give me the 5 names. And then give me their immigration numbers. Tell me what country and how many people immigrated to the United States from the poorest countries. Okay? Now I know we haven't talked about GDP and how economics truly impact immigration yet. We will talk about that next week. This is to kind of get your brains going and to get you some background knowledge. And we'll dive more into how much impact immigration has on economics next week. But we have talked about push and pull factors. We've talked about what causes people to move from one country to the other. And so that's where this question is truly coming from. So on the next 2 videos, you'll see me explain the second part of this project and the third part of this project. And then on the 3rd video, you'll see me explore the website that you're using to complete this activity or this project. And there's also, again, a link on my website to get you to this website so you don't have to remember what to type in and what to click.